how actually organizational communication can help us. I found 3 to 4 ways that I think organizational communication can help us. First, I think we can say it helps us to accomplish tasks that related to, for example, a specific roles and responsibility of sales, services, and production. Another way is to help us to adapt to change through individual and organizational creativity and adaptation. Another thing I can mention is that it can help us to complete tasks through the maintenance of policy, procedures, or regulations that supports our daily and continuous operations. And another thing can be, for example, it helps us to develop relationships where, as an example, as Goldhaber mentioned, is it's where human messages are directed at within the organization, their attitude, morale, satisfaction, and fulfillment. Well, I can add one more. I can say it can help us to coordinate, to plan, and to control the operations of organization through the management, for example. So organizational communication is how any organizations represents, presents, and constitute their organizational climate and culture. The attitude, for example, the value and the goals that characterize the organization or an institute and its members are actually, in general, can be organizational, the way that the organization communicate them. Organization communication mainly focus on building relationships, as the name communication shows, and it focuses on interacting with the internal organizational members and interested external public, like customers, for example. Mark Koshman, if I say his name right, some of the names are difficult to pronounce. Mark Koshman explains in his animated YouTube that we have 2 ways of looking at organizational communication. The conventional approach is one way, which focus on communication with organizations. And the second approach is communication as organization, meaning that organizations are a result of the communication of those within them. So communication is not just about transferring and transmitting messages between senders and receivers, but also it constitutes or make up our social life, social world. Much of our communications are normally involve sending and receiving relatively, I can say, unproblematic messages. If you don't have problem, for example, with internet right now, and acting on that information. Other times, they are things that are a bit more complex. It is not always very straightforward with communication. It is when, for example, when you need to resolve a conflict with a close friend or a family member. There is much more going on in these type of situations than just exchanging information. You are actually engaging in a complex process of meaning and negotiation rules that are created by the people that are involved in it. For organizations to be successful, there must have the competent communicators. It means that in such a study shows that organizations rely on effective communication and efficient communication skills from their members, their staff. A number of survey shows that these surveys are done with a group like Davis and Miller or Perigo and God. There are numerous surveys like that, that they identify actually effective oral and written communications as the most, as the skill that they, these days organizations are really looking for. For example, the Department of Labor in the United States reported that communication competency actually is one of the most vital skill necessary for 21st century for workforce to achieve organizational success. This is when I teach to education courses to teachers, I normally insist on 21st century skills and how it is important to implement them in the classrooms while they're teaching. And this is actually, this course that we are having is kind of an evidence to that topic. Also, another aspect is that organizations normally, any companies, let's say, look for people who can follow and give instructions. They can properly listen and provide useful feedbacks and get along with coworkers and customers, for example. They can network, they can provide serviceable information and work well in team, and they are creative, and they can critically solve problems and present ideas in a understandable manner. Developing such communication in any company and the awareness and effectiveness of that is more than just having like a know-how to do something, and know-how knowledge type means you just know what is the communication and just go for it. An efficient organizational communication, I can say, can include knowing how to create and exchange information and work with diverse groups and individuals, and also communicating complicated and changing circumstances, as well as having the aptitude or motivation to communicate in an appropriate manner. So as you see, as an introduction to just define communication, we know that communication, we are not just talking about transferring information or pure knowledge, but we are trying to understand it deeply. What is happening between two persons or a group of people, how you exchange your ideas is what is matter. I would like to look at the organizational communication and how it began. As you know, at least at the moment, communication study is deeply root in the oral rhetorical traditions of ancient Rome and Greece, similar to many of the early concepts that shaped such discipline. I can say some of the founding principle of this topic is originated in the East. As early as the 4th century, I can say, you can guess, Chinese scholars concentrated on the problem of communicating within the vast government bureaucracy, as well as between the government and the people. Ancient people from the East, scholars actually, focus on information flow, trustability of messages, and quality of information within the governmental bureaucracy. These still remain areas of focus for any communication happening in any type of organization that you will learn in your in this class with us. Like most of our fields, specializations, organizational communication actually began in the mid-20th century with the work of, if you've heard of him, P.E. Lal and Charles Redding at the University of Purdue. During the industrial age, the focus of organizational communication was on worker productivity as or as it goes under the aspect of industrial period. And it also focused on organizational structure and overall effectiveness of people working in a company or organization. Through this work, people were interested in higher profits and managerial efficiency. Foley, for example, is often referred to as the first management consultant in the United States. She focused specifically on message complexity. I recommend you to search more about her on Google Scholar. And she mentioned appropriate channel choices and worker participation in organizations. Another person like Bernard actually focus on communication as the main, like the center of every organizational process, and argue that people must be able to interact with each other for an organization to be successful. As a specialization in our field, I can say organizational communication can arguably be traced back to a book named Sharing Information with Employees by Heron. I think it was published in 1940s. This person looked at manager employee communication, and another approach in this aspect can be Putnam and Cheney stated that specialization of organizational communication grew out of three main speech communication traditions, which are public addressing, persuasion, and social science research on interpersonal corporate executive as early as the 1920s. Also, there are early works like Dale Carnegie, his article on how to win friends and influence people. Such ideas focus more on necessary oral presentations and communications and written communication skills for managers to be successful in an organization. Another group of researchers such as Redding and Tompkins identify three periods for development of organizational communication. These two separated into the era of preparation, identification, and the era of identification and consolidation, and the era of maturity and innovation. During the first era, which is from 1900 to 1940s, much of the ground group was normally based upon the discipline that we know today. Scholars normally focus on the importance of communication in organizations, and the primary focus during this period was on public address, business writing, managerial communication, and persuasion. Then they move one step further between 1940 and 70s. In the period of identification and consolidation, we can see the beginning of business and industrial communication with certain groups and organizational relationships being recognized as important. And during the last period, which is the maturity and innovation from 1970s onward, they are empirical researches that mostly they are motivated by innovative efforts to develop concepts, theoretical aspects, and philosophical critiques. As with other specialization over the last century, this topic of communication has evolved as well as a dialogue between business and academic context. Redding and Tompkins conclude that by 1967 or 8, organizational communication had finally achieved at least a moderate degree of success in two aspects. Breaking from its business and industrial shackles, and second, gaining a reasonable measure of recognition as an entity worthy of serious academic study. As I mentioned earlier, this topic was not really as important as the rest of the topics in the field of business and management. And still we somehow, if you are not studying business communication or organizational communication as the main major, this topic normally goes under different topics and you will hear it here and there. So we learn about these three era, and I would like to mention how is it like for organizational communication today. As communication evolve, research continue to develop as usual, and organizational communication actually continues to redefine itself. It goes along with all the other concepts in social studies. Actually, in the early stages, this area focused on leaders giving public presentations, but most recently, the focus is on all levels of interaction in organizations, because I think the interpersonal relationships are a large part of like organizational communications these days, and we are more of a human focused rather than the hierarchical bureaucratic way that we used to be. And so there is a huge number of research that focus on how interpersonal relationships are conducted in a framework of organizational hierarchy. Modern organizational communication research can be summarized into 8 major traditions. That I summarize it into a few keywords, such as communication channel, communication climate, network analysis, superior subordinate communication, the information processing perspective, the rhetorical perspective, the cultural perspective, and the political perspective. I can say since the 80s, this specialization has expanded to include work or organizational culture, power, and conflict management, and organizational rhetoric. If you were to take an organizational communication course in your university, in your studies, much of the time I think would be spent focusing on developing your skills in organizational socializations, interviewing, giving individual and group presentations, creating positive work relationship, performing evaluation, conflict resolution, stress management, decision making, and things like that. So actually, I can go on and tell you briefly why studying organizational communication is important. I think we have some slide for that. I put it there, so if you're looking, you don't get bored. Okay, I will go through that later. Okay, so as I mentioned about the research in this field, when you look at this, the study of organizational communication, we normally use the quantitative method to predict behaviors or qualitative method to understand behavior. We can actually use a qualitative method to study communication in the natural environment of organizations in order to understand organizational culture and how they function, for example. And critical approaches look at organization and, as Miller said, sites of dominations, where specific individuals are marginalized or disadvantaged by oppressive groups or structures. And mostly the focus of this type of research involves on gender and ethnic identity. And I think it's a type of research these days are very important. And as you can see, many companies are stating that they are respecting the different genders, races, colors, and stuff. You can even see it on the first page that of if you play computer game, on the first page they mention that. When looking at something such as a company website or the pamphlets, if they have any, or the employee handbook, you can see these messages are kind of political messages that are showing there are some disadvantage for a particular group of people. So still in some companies they are doing it indirectly, that somehow they do not accept a certain type of people and they discriminate, but it's becoming rare to be able to do that. For understanding organizational communication, I think it is important to know the chronology of how this communication in general developed. Now that I think you understand how the concept of organizational communication is, we can go and separate it into 5 different perspectives and look at it from a different timeline. The first timeline I would like to start with is classical management perspective. I would like to know if anybody knows anything about classical management perspective. Anybody who is listening? Katmel, May is, I think, there. Sandani, Tivia, anybody?
I think it's regarding the belief that workers have on physical and economical needs. Depends on how they feel satisfied of their job, and I'm not quite sure.
No, it's okay. Thank you. Could be, why not? Another person? Anybody else? No? Okay. So thanks for sharing with us your idea. Actually, this classical management perspective is the original perspective for understanding organizational communication. And this can be described using a, I can say, machine metaphor, maybe. For example, at the beginning of the industrial age, when people thought science could solve almost every problem, Frederick Taylor, he actually, along with the people like Henry Fayol and Max Weber, try to apply scientific solutions to organizations. Scientific solution, I mean, like they try to get from the natural sciences, the laws that impact natural sciences, and bring it to social sciences. And it's not just only on organizational communication. Almost all the social studies were going under this change. This group of people actually wanted to see how organizations and workers could function in an ideal way. And during the Industrial Revolution, they wanted to know how they could maximize their profit. So the classical management perspective actually focused on workers' productivity. Somehow, I agree with what you said. Uh, I mentioned about the machine metaphor. The machine metaphor of classical management suggests that there are three basic aspects that should exist in organizations, which are specialization, standardization, and predictability. This is said by Miller. And I can say in Thailand, many companies that are still in this stage, the classic management style. Those who did research in this perspective, they mentioned that every employee should have a specialized function, and therefore, essentially, any individual could perform a job if they are properly trained. So if one individual fails to do their job, they are easily replaceable with another person since people are seen as simply parts of a machine. On the other hand, Taylor developed his theory, which is one of the most famous theory of scientific management from his early days as uh, he was working in a machine shop. Actually, he actually was going. He didn't really know, I think, that he's going to influence organizations and our idea of working life today. And so Taylor could not understand why organizations and individuals would not want to maximize efficiency. And uh, another person actually wrote about Taylor. I think his name is Copley. In his biography, he mentioned that Taylor shows Taylor as a man who was driven by perfection. And he stated it exactly like this. The spectacle of a man doing less than his best was to him morally shocking. He enthusiastically believed that to do anything less than your best is to add to the sum of the world's unrighteousness. Kind of very dictative, but I read it for you to not confuse it. So this is the idea of how Taylor was seeing the world from the Copley's perspective. However, workers actually were not always as enthusiastic about efficiency and quality as Taylor expected them to be, especially when you think about the significant difference in the status and pay between, for example, the management and the labor. For the common laborer during the industrial age, this new approach to employment meant maybe losing your job if a scientific formula showed that fewer workers could do the same job. And if you don't think this is alive today, I think just think about companies such as Apple that have employees overseas to manufacture iPhones rather than having them in the US or the main base. So this is during this time that Max Weber also developed his idea about bureaucracy. I hate this term because we are still bound to such systems. He was actually fascinated by what the ideal organization should look like. This is a period that they normally are obsessed with the perfections and idealism. And he believed that the effective hierarchies helped organization to operate effectively. So in his ideas, things like precise rules, a division of labor, centralized authority, and a distinctly defined hierarchy should be something that any organization needs to uh, think about, and this should be driven by rational thoughts and avoid any type of emotions. So it's kind of inhumane to think about it these days. Such qualities, in Weber's perspective, would let organizations to operate more in a predictable manner, and the employee knew what to expect and who was in charge, and the management could make any decisions based on such familiar and relevant information rather than irrational feelings. I want you to think about it. For example, think about the bureaucracy in your workplace or in your school. During high school, for example, we had it more during the K-12 studies. There are many division of labors, rules, policies, and regs and procedures. Registering, for example, for a class, when I was a bachelor student, it was like registering for class was a lot of paperwork. We had to track transcripts, I don't know, obtain financial aid, and living in the campus, housing, all this needed a certain bureaucratic process. I can say today I'm a foreigner living in Thailand. For my visa, I'm still going through the same bureaucratic process every 3 months and every year. So this is going to be, I think, the same. I would like you to share, if anybody is able to share your experience with the bureaucracy in an environment you face with, like this, all this paperwork and the process that you had to go through in order to obtain a certain situation. For example, marriage, for example, applying for university and things like that. Can you share with me, please? Sandan, are you there?
Yes, madam.
Can you share a little bit of your experience with bureaucracy, paperwork? Sandan, where are you from?
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Where are you from?
From Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka. How's bureaucracy in Sri Lanka? You know what is bureaucracy? Bureaucracy is all the paperwork and the legal things you have to go through. For example, you want to register for school or register for marriage, you have to collect a lot of documents in order for you to be able to process that. Do you have such system in Sri Lanka?
I can't hear you, madam.
You can't hear me.
Now okay.
You okay? Okay. Tell me about, are you married?
Hello.
Are you married?
Yes.
I think Sandan cannot hear me. Anybody else cannot hear me too? Mrs. Ta, are you here?
I can hear you.
You can hear me, right? Okay. Sandan, can you share your experience with the bureaucracy, please? Okay, I think he might have issue with internet. How about Tivia?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, where are you from again? Sorry.
I'm from Sri Lanka.
Okay, Sri Lanka. So I talked about a little bit of classic management and bureaucracy, right? I would like you to share your experience with bureaucracy in Sri Lanka. How's the paperwork there?
Regarding marriages, you mean?
Like, for example, if you want to get married, could you just get married in one day and everything is done and you are legally married, or you have to go through a long process?
Well, it depends actually. I think you have to inform the registrations office before at least 2 weeks to 4 weeks prior to your marriage date. And depends on the date they have, they will let you know the schedule, and that's how that works. But since I'm not married, I'm not. It's just the general knowledge I have. I'm not very right sure about it.
Okay. I think in most of the country, for example, if you want to say about marriage, there are certain documents you have to prepare, and it takes quite a long time. And then in order for you to be able to register legally, you have to book a time with the government offices, and then they give you a certain date and you will go there. So these are all bureaucracy that we are actually trapped in. Okay, anybody else would like to share some experience on bureaucracy? If not, we continue. No? Okay. So I would like to share a little bit about the ideas of Frederick Taylor. I think today I'm quite obsessed with him. But before that, I think it's time for a break. If we can have like 10-minute break and come back by 3, would it be okay? Mrs. Ta?
Yes.
Yes. So this is time for a break. I will come back by 5 to 10 minutes, and we continue with the Frederick Taylor. Okay?
Okay. For your, for you guys too, if you can hear, please respond. Otherwise, we're not really sure that the message get to you or the connection is properly getting it or not. Okay. Can you pause the recording, and then once we're back, we can continue that.
Pause it. All right.
About Frederick Taylor a little bit more under the classical management system, because I think it's interesting to know how his ideas impact, for example, fast food industry like McDonald's. I think all of us know the McDonald's. I want you to think about it, how fast food chains are kind of impacted by going to one of these fast food shops next time whenever you go, and when you order like a Big Mac, I want you to observe how they are doing their job in the kitchen. So this type of fast food chains actually are very influenced by Frederick Taylor, and they literally actually using a stopwatch to use their timing properly. This is an idea that came from Taylor, and he used his time and motion studies to prove that for every job, there is one best way to perform in a specific shortest time possible. This means that in his perspective, if you want to perform the best way in the shortest way possible, you need to properly select, train, and reward the workers with the right tasks. When I say go and look into the, secretly actually, you cannot directly go and look into the kitchen in fast food chains such as McDonald's, I want you to see when you order, for example, a burger, fries, and Coke, you might see the employees separated by station and tasks in the kitchen and in the front section, doing their specific part to fulfill your order. And the design of hard plastic seats, for example, and the bright colors in the fast food restaurants is done with a specific intention to get customers in and out of the restaurant and in an efficient and expected manner. So I would like you to think about it. There's a case about McDonald's I can share with you later, that how these two started and how they used this idea. Also, there's a movie about this company that you can actually watch. It is better and easier to understand. So theory of classical management focus on how management worked, specifically looking at what management should do to be most effective. For a person like Fayol, organizational members should be clear who is in charge, and everyone should know their role in an organization. And he mentioned that, for example, an organization should be grouped in a precise hierarchy that limits the flow of communication to top-down communication. It means when you think about the hierarchy, you think about a triangle, right? On top, whoever is there normally will not communicate with the one that is belong to the bottom of the triangle, the pyramid. This is quite outdated, but still in many countries, such as Asian countries, we are seeing such top-down communications process. In Thailand, I can say it still exists. There is a theory called Theory X that is an example of classical management theory that I found it interesting to share with you. In this theory, managers micromanage employees by using reward punishment tactics and limiting employees' participation in decision making. And this theory actually sees employees as basically very lazy and unmotivated. And because of this, managers must closely supervise their workers one by one. Those that don't do their work are disposable parts of a machine, and this allows the management to actually mistreat and abuse their employees, ultimately can lowering the very thing they all are after, which is greater productivity. Actually, organizations using this approach are quite possible to find everywhere in the world. It's not only in Asia. And for example, I want to ask the ones that currently working or had this experience. Have you ever had, for example, a boss or manager who treated you like a part of a machine that you can be changed anytime or replaced anytime, and that you have no value or little value? Anybody? I had this experience. What about anybody else? Fantastic participation. Hello.
Yeah, actually, I had some sort of experience in my working life. So
You had experience?
yeah, actually, few minutes.
How did you feel?
Actually, I feel sometimes I feel I'm so trivials that actually I felt that I was confused about my qualities in actually it was early days of my life. I was young, like early.
Yeah, that's even worse. If you are young and you experience this, then it might impact you in long term. You're working at the moment?
Yeah, actually, yeah, I'm working at the moment.
What do you do, if I may ask?
Yeah, I'm working with an US agency uh,
Oh, okay.
from Bangladesh.
It's better
Yeah,
than your
now
first
yeah, now yeah, it's now yeah, when you get experience and get along with those things, you getting mature and older and older, things get better and better. Sometimes it happens through time.
Yeah, but in general, I don't agree with getting along with micromanagement. I think it's a very unhealthy manner adopted by managers that they don't even trust themselves. So if you have to do the work and they are micromanage you, then you have to do it. But in other case, I wouldn't stand such behavior. Anyway, anybody else want to share? If not, we continue. No? At least tell me yes or no. No, I take it as a no. Okay. In my culture, if somebody is quiet, it means that you are approving positively. Sandan, you want to share something?
No, no, madam.
Okay. All right, let's continue. We finished with the classic perspective. I don't want to go more into detail. You can do some studies by yourself. We have internet these days, and you can study more and more to whatever extent if you're interested in. The next perspective that I picked is a human relation perspective. Because the classic management was so kind of a mechanical system and didn't treat people as humans, so there are a lot of scholars that wanted to focus on the human elements of the organizations. So the human relation approach actually focuses on how organization members relate to one another and how everybody's needs influence their performance in the organization. Elton Mayo in 1920s and his team from Harvard scientists, they began a series of studies that actually were initially interested in how to modify working conditions to increase workers' productivity and decrease employees' turnover and change the overall poor organizational effectiveness that Hawthorne electric plant near Chicago had. So this was their main focus. This team discovered that no matter what changes they actually made to the work environment, such as like whatever change they make to the environment of the work, this is what I want to say, like adjusting like the temperature, work schedule, worker isolation, the worker productivity increased simply due to the fact that the researchers were paying attention to them. This is the act of simply paying attention to workers and addressing their social needs showed a significant change in their productivity. And this is where the term the hot up, if you ever heard of it. Mayo's work provided a very important aspect. I think my internet is unstable. I hope you can hear me. So this is actually the beginning of a new way of looking at the workers in an organization, which is more into human, to look at the workers and the staff as human rather than machine parts. Maslow hierarchy, I think most of you might be heard of him or familiar with Maslow. Maslow's hierarchy suggests that actually human beings are motivated to satisfy their personal needs. And this theory is still important to study today, and we still are trying to understand it in relation to our workplaces. So apart from this, another group of researchers, they mentioned that if we want to talk about the management theories, Maslow work actually is the possibility of connecting, shows the possibility of connecting higher level needs to worker motivations. And if organizational goals and individual needs could be mixed or integrated into organizations, so people would feel more self-confident and acquire more self-esteem. And as a result, the self-actualization through work and then motivation would be self-sustaining. These are all terms in the Maslow's hierarchy of hierarchy of laws. And if you remember the X theory I mentioned earlier, managers don't trust their workers and employees according to this theory, because they think workers are inherently unmotivated and lazy. And on the other hand, I can say from the managerial perspective, there is a theory why managers, those that actually take a human relation perspective to employees, assume that workers are actually inherently self-motivated and look for responsibility to achieve success. As a result of such idea of this changing perspective, managers began to invite feedbacks and encourage a degree of participation in organizational decision makings. And so unfortunately, this is the beginning of the weekly or monthly meetings that we have somehow everybody hates. So focusing on human relation as a way to motivate employee productivity was the way that they try to adapt. Today, actually, many companies uh, can motivate employees or just merely make them happy by keeping them, support them, provide them what they need, and even let them sleep. There are companies that let employees to take a nap during the working hour so they can feel refreshed.